Over its ridiculously lengthy run, various plot points, character details, and timelines have been forgotten or completely erased from The Simpsons' history. Fans, of course, have picked up on these rule breaks, and for some, they actually ended up ruining much of the love that they had for previous stories. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 times The Simpsons broke its own rules. Number 10, Marge's fear of flying. The aptly titled Season 6 episode, Fear of Flying, focuses on Marge Simpson and her struggles with, well, her fear of flying. It's established in this episode that Marge links planes and flying to the childhood trauma that she suffered after seeing her father working as a flight attendant. Clearly, this issue with flying has been with Marge for her entire adult life, so how on earth did she manage to fly to Washington, D.C. with her family in the Season 3 episode, Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington? Now, you could argue that Marge's phobia was triggered by her flight in Season 6, but it's certainly appears as if she knew ahead of time that this would set her off. Also, in Season 3, there is a sequence where Bart releases all the oxygen masks, causing Homer and the other passengers to freak out, but crucially, not Marge. Now, phobias and other psychological disorders are nuanced, of course, but the likelihood is that Marge's inconsistent fear of flying is down to the writer's room's own fear of continuity. Number 9, Bart's shrimp allergy. The B-plot of Season 18's Please Homer, Don't Hammer 'Em pits Bart and Principal Skinner against each other in a battle of allergies. This all begins when Alberto discovers that his nemesis is allergic to peanuts and goes around wielding one on a stick to force Skinner to do his bidding. To even the odds, then, Skinner steals Bart's medical records and then creates a stick of his own, this time with a shrimp on the end of it. Now, the problem with this, aside from the countless violations of basic human ethics that are involved in this story, is that Bart himself has eaten shrimp before. In fact, he mentions that he ate some in Season 13's The Frying Game and has been around his father devouring the crustaceans on numerous occasions. With an allergy so sensitive that it can be set off by a single shrimp on a stick, you'd have to think that Bart would have avoided them at all costs. Side note as well, Bart is also apparently allergic to butterscotch, imitation butterscotch, glow-in-the-dark monster makeup, and, of course, cauliflower. So Skinner could have put any one of these on a stick and still kept within the rules of the show. Number 8, the old Simpson farm. Homer Simpson and his father, Abraham Grandpa Simpson, have made many mistakes together over the years. But one of their most dangerous was when they accidentally burnt down the old Simpson family farm in Season 6. In completely separate moments of idiocy, the Simpson men both start large fires after returning to the building where Homer spent most of his childhood. They manage to escape unscathed, but the farmhouse itself is completely destroyed by the flames. Except 5 seasons later, it's completely untouched. In E.I.E.I.DO., whilst on the run from a man, Homer is challenged to a duel, and so the Simpsons hide out in the farmhouse and start growing the hybrid plant, Tobacco. Not only has the house miraculously unarsoned itself though, but it's actually in a better condition than Homer and Grandpa actually found it in. Not by much, mind you, but there is still a working tractor and the property is habitable. Now, the issue with this rural resurrection is that the farmhouse is key to the plots of both Grandpa versus Sexual Inadequacy and E.I.E.I.DO. In the former, its destruction symbolizes both Homer and Grandpa moving on from the past, and in the latter, it's the setting for most of the action. So, you can't have it both ways, guys. Number 7, Flan Diddley-Anders. One of the most well-executed character episodes of The Simpsons is Hurricane Neddy from the show's 8th season. After his home and possessions are destroyed in a storm, Ned Flanders loses his faith and suffers a breakdown, committing himself to an asylum in the process. This leads him to discover more about his childhood, which was dominated by his uncontrollable anger. As a method of dealing with said rage, with a little help from the University of Minnesota Spankological Protocol, Ned develops his trademark Flanderisms, i.e. when he adds nonsense phrases like diddly or oodly onto regular words. This makes sense for Ned's character, but what about the other Flanderisms? See, in Lisa the Vegetarian, we meet some of the extended Flanders family, and one member, Jose Flanders, greets Homer with Buenos Ding Dong Diddly Dias, and the entire clan can be heard uttering Ned's trademark greeting, Hi Diddly Ho. Now, this would imply, of course, that the Flanderisms are actually inherited and passed down from generation to generation, which completely contradicts the events of Hurricane Neddy. Now, is it possible that every single member of the family had the exact same treatment as Ned did when he was a boy? Well, yes it is, but is it likely? Absolutely not diddly-ot. Number 6, the personal history of C. Montgomery Burns. You'd think a character as rich and powerful as Mr. Burns could afford a bit more control over his own backstory. His age, place of birth, and countless other personal details are flimsy as the man's own anatomy. However, we're turning our attention specifically to his childhood here. See, in Season 5's Rosebud, one of the show's best ever episodes by the way, we see in a flashback that Burns actually grew up dirt poor. One day though, a mysterious rich man arrived and promised to adopt young Monty, and naturally he accepts without a second thought. The future owner of the Springfield power plant is young in this scene, but not as young as a scene in the episode Burns' heir. And that's because in another flashback, this time triggered when he begins to drown in his bathtub, we see Burns as a baby in a fancy nursery firing his nanny. This would of course imply that he was actually born into a wealthy family. Of course, it could be the case that Burns himself is an unreliable narrator. He is older than the son and has been known to dabble in fantasy in the past. However, it's probably more likely that the show itself decided to tweak his biography to make a better Citizen Kane parody. Number 5, Homer's job. The most illogical thing about Homer Simpson's job at the power plant is how he's managed to hold onto it for so long, despite being the world's worst employee. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. Instead, in Season 2's The Way We Was, a teenage Homer is advised by his guidance counselor to apply for a job at the newly opened plant. However, in future episodes, it's revealed that the plant itself has existed long before this. Take Season 13's The Blunder Year, in which Homer remembers seeing a dead body in the plant's drainage when he was 12. Then there's the question of what Homer's job actually is. He's most often referred to as the plant's safety inspector, which is a position that we see him appointed to in Season 1's Homer's Odyssey. Once again though, this is later disproved in a flashback, because in Maggie Makes 3, an episode set before Homer's Odyssey, Homer is shown already in his safety inspector role. So, was he demoted from his role and then re-promoted later on? That's a likely story, isn't it? It's clear then that the rules surrounding Homer's employment record are as patchy as the plant's safety regulations. And we all know how bad those are. Number 4, Skinner's parentage. Even though it was released way back in 1997, The Principal and the Pauper is still talked about as one of the most divisive and ill-conceived episodes in The Simpsons' long history. The crux of the episode, that being that Principal Skinner is actually an imposter named Armin Tamzarian, living the life of his old army sergeant, upset swaths of fans who felt betrayed after getting invested in Skinner over 9 seasons. Even Simpsons creator Matt Groening hates this episode, calling it a quote, "a mistake" in an interview in 2002. Not only did The Principal and the Pauper leave fans feeling a little bit let down, but it also created dozens of plot holes around this character. Firstly, there's the Season 6 episode about the Flying Hellfish, which is, of course, Grandpa Simpson's battalion in World War II. Members of this squad include the fathers of various modern-day Springfielders, including Principal Skinner's own dad, Sheldon. Now, Sheldon looks and sounds exactly like the man we know as Seymour Skinner, but how can this be when that person isn't actually biologically related to him? Was he an imposter too? Is the whole Tamzarian family rotten to the core? We don't know. Basically, The Principal and the Pauper is a bad episode that has given many Simpsons fans headaches for several decades now. Number 3, The Simpson Gene. At the end of Lisa the Simpson from Season 9, the middle Simpson child is cured of her fears of losing her intelligence after she finds out that the so-called Simpsons gene only affects males. Now, the Simpson gene, as described by Grandpa, causes members of the family to grow dumber as they grow older. However, as proven when Homer tracks down extended members of the clan, it's actually only those with a Y chromosome who lose their smarts. However, there are 2 glaring exceptions here. One is Homer's half-brother Herb Powell. He is a Simpson by birth and displays fantastic intelligence in the story we see him in. He's the head of his own company and even invents a device that lets adults communicate with babies. So yeah, it doesn't get much smarter than that. And the other outlier, well, that's Lisa's own father. See, in the episode HOMR, it is revealed that Homer is actually so stupid because he had a crayon lodged in his brain. And after the offending item is removed, he actually becomes super intelligent, miserable, but intelligent. It's clear then that the Simpson gene does not affect all of the Simpson men, but then again, we did hear about the gene from Grandpa himself, so maybe we're the stupid ones after all. Number 2, the magical Rumpus room. The layout of the Simpson house is baffling and would take the team who discovered the Higgs boson to fully understand. It changes number a lot in the early seasons of the show. Their list of addresses on Evergreen Terrace reads like a lottery ticket, and in one episode, the house is on a totally different street entirely. However, if we accept that the house is on 742 Evergreen Terrace, that still doesn't explain its physics-busting interior. See, the family has a mysterious hallway that leads to the back of the house from the kitchen. It's not on the way to the basement, as that's off to the the main foyer, there's also the downstairs bathroom, which changes location depending on when it's needed for jokes. And then there's the Rumpus room. This room comes and goes kind of as it pleases, appearing when it's needed and then disappearing when it's not. Marge herself even says as much in the episode White Christmas Blues. Whether it's the Hogwarts room of requirement or just a space the Simpsons don't use that often, the Rumpus room has baffled purist fans of the show for decades, and we may never get a definitive location for it. Number 1, That 90s Show. The entirety of the season 19 episode of That 90s Show is kind of a disgrace to the Simpsons timeline. As the title suggests, the bulk of this episode takes place somewhere in the 1990s, as Homer and Marge recall when they almost broke up after Marge became infatuated with her college professor. Never mind, of course, that Homer and Marge are already married with 3 kids when the first episode of the show came out in 1989. The events of this episode throw every well-known fact about the early seasons of the show into complete disarray. Considering that a lot of those episodes are clearly set in the 90s, how on earth can they be happening alongside a teenage Marge and Homer's relationship troubles? Now, the idea of a floating timeline has been, well, floated to erase this and a lot of other episodes' retcons, but in reality it doesn't really matter why the Simpsons chronology doesn't make sense. The show has just become a twisted version of itself, warped over time by the relentless demand for more content. So yeah, of course the writers have struggled to keep up because there's just too much history to get it all right. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Were you bothered by any of these Simpsons inconsistencies? And are there any major ones I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.